Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Gibson, and I'm back with Colin and asked him to come back and tell us more about things that he's been finding in his local area and from his background, family history, and things like that. And before you share the screen, Colin, if there's anything you'd like to tell us about your presentation today.
I'm just gonna go through some of the photos and videos that I couldn't last time. Yeah, and we'll just go from there. But the first thing I'm gonna share is kind of where this all started. This is the article I found when I had that dream about an ancestor of mine disturbing an Indian mound. So yeah, this is from the Evening Post. I can just read it for you. Indian relics of an Ohio mound. Valuable finds have been made in an old Indian mound in Walnut Grove, Martins Ferry. Jewels have been taken from this ancient tumulus, opals and emeralds and crystals, and the curious whorl-like carvings on their settings like those in ancient Irish ornaments, known to have been made from Phoenician patterns that were found everywhere the Phoenicians traded. The work is being carried out slowly at Martins Ferry for fear that some of the precious relics might be lost or overlooked. One skull, which has been found, is extremely large, nearly twice as big as the modern normal, and the skull seems higher than would be expected of prehistoric man. Spearheads, darts, arrowheads, and hatchets, beautifully chipped and with neatly drilled holes, have been found in proximity to human bones. Two cup-like stones have also been found whose use is conjectural. Several of these have been found in the neighborhood of the mound, either on the surface or in the earth, but so worn that it is difficult to tell whether they had been shaped artificially or were lucky stones of concave natural shapes. Bones have been found in great plenty, which causes some to think that the tumulus was not so much erected to the memory of a great chief as it was to a tribal cemetery. However, it may have been that captives were sacrificed on the mound tombs of the chief to be his servants in the spirit world. So,
Now, this was an article that you found after you had a dream.
yes, after, yeah, I had a week of very bizarre dreams, it seemed like every night. And first one, I just woke up and I remember asking my mom, I'm like, I had a dream about Indian mounds and it seemed very real and it seemed like it took place back in Martins Ferry. Like, did any of our ancestors have anything to do with that? And she really didn't know much about mounds either. Once I typed into Google Indian Mound Martins Ferry, this was the first thing that came up. And I showed her and I showed, my family, and they were all like, what? Like, because that Walnut Grove is right where they lived. And there's so many amazing mounds down there. I mean, my family, my dad and my uncles and stuff go to a golf trip every year there at Oglebay Park. They play a course called Moundsville, which is the same place where the Grave Creek Mound is and the old West Virginia Asylum. I think it's a prison now. Yeah, there's a lot going on down there in the Ohio Valley.
And those locations are Wheeling, correct?
Yes. So, which means like skull, like something with the skull, I think, place of the skull.
When I was looking there, the Grave Creek Mound is right across from the prison,
Right.
like
And
right across.
yeah, and I think, is that the one where there's a horse track around it or no?
That I'm not sure about, but
That seems to be a theme.
that came up when I was looking at the Creel Mound in West Virginia, which is near Charleston or in the Charleston area, South Charleston. That when they found the mound in the 19th century, they turned it into a racetrack. So the judge's
Right.
stand was at the top of the mound and the race was around the mound. It's a pretty good sized mound.
Right. I think I read somewhere that the diameter of a lot of them was the perfect distance for a horse racetrack. I mean, up here in Northeast Ohio, I've seen like dirt bike trails around a lot of mountain areas. Yeah, the coal mining down there was so extensive. Just going back to Martins Ferry today, there's like a couple hundred people who live there, and it is just everything down there's ghost town, you know, and it feels eerie. It feels really, really old. It's not far from Marietta. which is another really important place but from back then. But
What
yeah, what
else?
do you make of this? The Phoenician patterns,
I think that there was one civilization with different empires that have come down to us. We hear about the Phoenicians and the Ottoman and Mughal, and the Washita Empire was in North America, Morocco. You hear about the Aztecs and the Incas, and all these different empires. In our history, it's they were fighting each other, and the history is fragmented. And I don't see this original civilization being fighting and fragmented. I see them as being harmonious and integrated, and that this
how do you
whole,
see race play out in that?
I'm sorry.
How do you see race?
So I've spoken a lot about the Moors and
Right.
the ancient Moorish civilization, and it was actually meeting a Moorish American man in Oklahoma City in 2013 that really started me into an awareness of the Moors and whose land this was originally. And that's not just in North America, that's all over the earth, the indigenous people of the earth, with the word Moor going back to Lemuria and Mu, ancient Mu. And the Washita of North America are called the Washita Moors. So Muu''urs, that have a very ancient history, and that everything that I'm seeing is that it connects to the Atlantean civilization. And, we're talking about the same civilization. And I see it connecting to the tribes of Israel that have come down to us, and that their whole identity and civilization and legacy was usurped by the controlling entities, families, individuals that came in, and I believe caused the destruction of the civilization of the old world, and came in to create a new world based on their desires for power and control. And they flipped the whole script of, who the actual creators of civilization were, how balanced and harmonious it was, and turned them into slaves in our narrative. And
Right.
the reality is we've all been their slaves in this new world order, with our birth certificates and wage slavery and,
Yeah. Working,
in
getting our
company
energy.
towns, working in mills. We're not free, but we've been led to believe that we're free because they really can't do this to us. They can't do what they've done. So they have to have our consent. And so that's how they've gotten it, is by lying to us and making it sound great. And in actuality, it's a means to achieve their end of control.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, why do we even work? Like, besides to make money and to give our energy to these entities that are huge companies and essentially like egregores now. So when you apply that to back then, these coal mines, people giving their lives, going through these spilling their blood for these companies,
It's a big
scary.
deal story. And so, with what you're saying about the big companies and corporations, essentially our history is turning companies into people,
Right.
incorporating them, and turning us into companies and straw men and legal fictions so they can control us.
Hmm.
It's how they've tricked us to give our power away as natural beings. They can't touch us, but they've turned us into businesses so they can. And they've turned businesses into living people in cities and whatnot with the process of incorporation, and actually conferring things like coats of arms on businesses,
Right.
you know, which were originally families, things like that. There's a lot of stuff to unpack in
I
everything
know
that's
it's so
happening.
heavy, and they've done such a good job of compartmentalizing the confusion,
Exactly.
making you have to check 10 different avenues to get anywhere. And it's like,
I've gone by, first of all, meeting the Moorish friend, meeting Moors, learning about the Moors. They're real, they're still with us. They haven't gone anywhere. And they know more about the legal stuff than anybody,
really,
how this whole system has been set up. And
yeah,
anyway, it's a house of cards. Let's just say that. What they've done and how they've justified what they took.
I just can't, I can't find where the motivation would be to,
I think it's a spiritual thing,
right,
honestly, probably a jealousy thing. If you look at what we are taught about fallen angels, and I think they're part of it, and they want us, and they're jealous of us, And so if you look at Paradise Lost, which was published 1666, 1667 timeframe by John Milton, it's actually the original predictive programming or disclosure, because it's like, okay, Satan and his buddies got together after they were kicked out of heaven and said, hey, we're going to mess up God's newest, most favored creation, which was humanity. And that's
As
exactly
Archon.
what's happening. I see this whole sequence of events as having been manipulated, and that these darker beings want another object of worship besides the creator of the universe. And when you get into that aspect of it, it's like that explains a lot of what's been going on. You know, again, unless you're tuned into it, you're not necessarily going to know that the Super Bowl halftime show is a satanic ritual.
I was
But
just talking about that. I mean, whew, all sports games are, the energy that transfer that takes place, and in the specific locations, it's so obvious now.
for those with eyes to see,
But
to watch a Super Bowl halftime show anymore, it's like, oh my
oh my
gosh.
gosh, I know.
But those that can see it don't see it. And there's symbolism and horrible imagery and all kinds of stuff
The
going on in
whole
those
thing,
things.
it's a whole presentation of a ritual. And it's, yeah, I mean, that's become really obvious to me lately. But these are something like you were talking about 1851. It almost looks like it was vandalized in 1851. This is the Sphinx. This is at Warden's Ledges in Hinckley, where I was talking about last week.
Mhm.
But I think I walk up here to this. And yeah, that rock right there says 1851 on it. See, I think those carvings are,
Well, there was one that you just showed that when you said that there were supposedly baseball players, that one, I think that one's supposed to be Ty Cobb or something like that.
this one they say is Romulus getting eaten by a wolf.
Okay.
which but which is funny because oh, there you see right there, it says 1851, but that face is supposed to be Ty Cobb, which is obvious it's not, because the writing just looks too new. I
And
mean,
it's
this whole
it's
place, like,
and it's not far from where you live,
yeah,
correct?
this is about 5 miles. This is Warden's Ledges, and there's all these places like right here. It looks like something was removed. I have some better examples right there. And there used to be a spring here.
While you're looking for that, I'm just going to look at the use of the word compartmentalized. Our history has
Oh,
been
yeah,
compartmentalized, and that's a really good way of describing it. Instead of looking at it as a whole, it's been chopped up into
which is I think
compartments.
if you can open somebody's eyes to one thing and it resonates with them, you can kind of spread the whole message. That I've found to get people to open their eyes basically is if one thing makes sense to them. It's like, say, like a biology, that's their thing, bio. And one thing that I say resonates with them, it kind of gets them to open up. But
I've discovered a lot just through pattern recognition of same things all over the earth. I mean, that's been what's done it for me. The
what do you think
same.
about him?
Yeah. That's the one that had Ty Cobb's name next to it when I was looking for baseball players, but
Really?
it
That's
wasn't really
funny.
clear. His name came up a couple of times, but specific face to go with it. But that ear reminds me of a nautilus or something.
Right.
But then what kind of hair is that, you know?
And there's only half of his face too. The other half is not on. So, but another thing that I saw the destruction of noses basically. And like on here and on the other bigger face, the nose is gone as well. And Mind Unveiled had something about that across the world, noses are, and I feel like that's connected to whenever the new writers of the narrative took over, the nose used to be looked at as the like our connection to God. So the destruction of all the noses on all these sculptures is kind of like a slap in the face type of.
I think that could be part of it, but I think it's also masking the identity of the people that
Oh,
were actually here. And a
yeah,
really good example of that is the Sphinx in Egypt. We were always told that it was used for target practice by Napoleon's troops. I remember learning that.
really? I never heard that.
Yeah, I remember that from whenever growing up. But that's a classic one, but that's absolutely right. I mean, statues are headless and noseless and armless, and it's found in
Right.
many different places.
One thing about Hinckley, it was I think George Bush's great grandfather or whatever was Judge Hinckley, um, the first settler from Connecticut here.
It's
But
interesting.
yeah,
There were certain families that were founders. I mean, you find that they were the same families essentially that were involved in this reset. And I found a lot of that when I was looking in the National Statuary Hall. And I've only gotten about halfway through and I haven't really gotten back to it, but I've done about 50 states. I mean, I'm sorry, 25 states, which is 50 statues. And I learned a lot about these families and hidden history doing that research because the strangest characters ended up there. Some of them famous, but most of them not. But they all had a connection somehow to.
when I was in DC, I wanted to go there, but it's not open anymore. I don't think. I don't think you can take tours of it of the natural. Right.
Smile. I hadn't heard that,
Exactly.
but after the events of 2020 somehow, or 2021, somehow that doesn't surprise me. And, maybe there are more than one reasons for that, but there is a lot of hidden history in that, found in the people that they've chosen to be represented in there.
So this is like I think this place used to be a church of some sort. Let me move this.
Looks like there might have been a face in that one.
Right. Oh yeah, I found that coin there that day, which is weird. Someone left it. It said "Love God" or something like that. There's also these holes just randomly.
Mhm.
It's just so many questions. This looks like a bird almost was removed
Or some,
because
maybe some
the
kind of
wing,
metal
yeah,
would have been there.
copper, like yeah, it looks like a lot of stuff was removed, and I know that there are sculptures or carvings that used to be included in the Warden's Ledges collection that aren't there anymore. That's a kind of that is the bird that I
Mhm.
is off the trail. That's its head, I think, and that's one of its wings. It's a back wing, but you can't even get close to that. I had to zoom way in. So the available sites here is just one stretch of, like a mile and a half loop trail when there's acres and acres filled with these outcropping of sandstone.
It reminds me of a parakeet or something like that.
I found some Hopewell bird carvings that are pretty similar to it. It reminds me of a turkey, and there was just a turkey outside my back door this morning in Hinckley. They had what was known as the Great Hinckley Hunt.
Was that a turkey hunt?
It was a no, they it was basically all the settlers decided that all the animals were killing all their crop and their food, so they decided one day that they just were going to go into the woods and kill every animal. And now there's every year vultures come back on the same exact day, and people will go to Hinckley to watch the vultures return, which is, they say, after they killed all the wolves and the bears, there were vultures that came for and had food for weeks, basically.
There's got to be more to that story.
I know. And when I asked even the librarians about that, they are the first to tell me that Hinckley is shrouded in mystery, and you'll never find the truth about anything. And especially said that about the hunt, the Great Hinckley Hunt, which is like its most famous thing. Is that have you seen that anywhere else?
What I saw was a reference to parakeets in what I was reading about the Lewis and Clark expedition. And it was Kansas City's coming to mind, and that they made mention of these parakeets. Definitely animal species that aren't here anymore. And I suspect camels are another one because there's a whole crazy story that goes along with the U.S. Camel Corps
Yes,
from the
yes.
1850s. Another, what during that same time period in the Southwest. I found that in San Antonio in Texas when I was looking that up. And
Yeah.
there was a movie, probably want to say from the 1980s, called Homps, Hawmps, that was based on. But the crazy story that goes along with that is that they went overseas to get these camels to bring them back.
I mean, there have been mummified turkeys and stuff found in Arizona and, buried with chiefs who were also mummies. Ben talks about that a lot, about there have been more mummies in America than anywhere else in the world. And nobody would know that.
Or the mummies came from Egypt. There's a museum in Shawnee, Oklahoma, which is where I had family living when I was waking up to all of this. And I was in Oklahoma City. There's a museum there, St. Gregory's, which was a Benedictine college, which is now part of a different university in Shawnee. But the museum may still be there, and it's a flat top pyramid, and they have mummies inside.
Really?
So we got these mummies from Egypt, that's what they tell us, but they're not
We
going
were
to even,
sending ours to Egypt,
it's like,
you know?
we're not going to get a straight answer about a mummies being here.
Yeah, there's stories about the Smithsonian sending our mummies to Egypt to make it look like they were found there.
In
I
South
mean, you said
America.
Benedictine college, right? And that's one of the Catholic sects, the Benedictines,
That's
um,
exactly right. The Benedictines, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the Jesuits,
mhm.
they were all part of this. And St. Gregory's, this was one of my findings when I first started doing this. So you've got St. Gregory's in Shawnee, and you've got Mount Magazine in Arkansas, and there's another Benedictine monastery close to Mount Magazine. It's in a linear relationship between those two locations, the two Benedictine monasteries. Spiro Mounds is in
Mhm.
between that location in Oklahoma and the location in Arkansas, and it falls along a golden ratio. So it was like geometrically laid out between these two Benedictine monasteries.
What came first? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
because that's how Poverty Point is too, right? It's spread out like that.
The Poverty Point is on a golden mean longitude along with other ancient sacred sites.
I know Cleveland. There's a town in Cleveland. Part of Cleveland's called Tremont, and it is said to have the most churches per square mile than anywhere in the country. I've been trying to just figure out what the hell it all means. The churches with the earthworks.
They were originally used for something else. And we were talking about music before we started and frequency, and
Right.
this civilization was based on resonant frequencies. And so their architecture would reflect that purpose and function.
I've I my freshman year of college, I went to the University of Dayton, and outside of one of their chapels there, they have a stone amphitheater. It's not that big, but it's basically like a stone walkway that's shaped in a way to where if you stand on the middle stone, not 2 inches to the right or 2 inches to the left, you stand on the middle stone, your voice will carry to the very far edges of this little stone area, basically. It say like on the campus tour before they had microphones, the priest would stand here so everyone could hear him. And it is a very bizarre experience when you hear yourself stand on that and speak, but it's like imagine the other applications in different ways.
And the acoustics were perfect in amphitheaters, whether they were in North America or Europe. Those are the ones that come to mind that I've studied, but they would have been all over the earth.
Oh yeah. I feel like that they turn baseball fields into them, or they turn previous amphitheaters into baseball fields now, or I see that all over Cleveland, like steps to nowhere that are in the middle of a crappy rundown park, and which are baseball fields are also always right by earthworks or across from power places.
Seriously, to anybody looking for any of this stuff locally, just go to a park.
Yeah.
That's a good starting place. It doesn't have to be a big park. It can be your local park. Stuff's there. I know for sure around Oklahoma City where I started waking up to all of this, but
Or look for these. These are always this right here is what they say is an old Indian fort from Weymouth Township. But this is just a picture I took of it driving by. And on the other side of the street to my right is 4 baseball fields. But you can see the mounds too, and there's a golf course right across from
I mean, true story. If
this.
you start looking, again, looking on Google Earth and looking at like the baseball fields that are shaped like a clover,
Yeah,
there's I found stuff around that. I don't think they're random placements, and you see that same configuration all over the place too. I've
right.
seen
It goes back to the circuit board. It's it's got to be something.
I've seen it in
Um,
Florida. I've seen it in Arizona. I mean, same thing.
let's see. This is at my house, and I've found these to be associated with mounds all over the place. Uh,
So that's like a water tower or
no,
gas.
this is a gas line that is from 1913. I've always just had to mow around it. The company is called Diversified Gas, and when I looked it up, this is their logo.
That's on top of a mound or earthwork.
Yeah, exactly. This is at a cemetery that's a couple miles from me. It has a gas line the same type of gas pipe from Diversified Gas Company. That's at this place called Crowfoot Cemetery, which is it's a beautiful place, and there's a lot written about it, but it has all the graves are Freemasons. This is blocked to the public, but this is like less than a mile from my house. I will show you the video of the mound walking out of my back door. This is across the creek in my backyard. Hold on.
You can see it. See the stones there,
Right.
the cut and shaped stones.
There's a tree for each one.
This is a really good example of you don't have to go far to find this stuff. You're bringing up really good examples here, like with the natural gas oil. I mean, I don't think there's anything natural about those. I think they're ancient technologies.
This is right in the creek too. That gas pipe. If I follow it down, I don't
And
know if it's still in use or anything either.
and how close is that to where you live?
Right in my backyard. This is part of Champion Creek, which is a tributary of the Rocky River, which flows into Lake Erie. So when I went to the library to ask them about what I should do, the gravestones in my backyard, they were like, "Oh, you live where Fairfax Smith lived, and you must live where his burial vault was robbed." And they had a few articles from the early 1900s explaining how. So my house is located on where the Smith dairy farm was, and Fairfax Smith was the one who owned it. He was a respected soldier from the War of 1812, and he got his gravestone shipped here from Italy twice. That's his current one.
Pretty
He has the
impressive.
biggest. Yeah. So basically, the base of that, the original base of this, is, according to the librarians, what I stumbled across in my creek. And his whole family used to be buried across my creek. But after the burial vault was robbed by people who were selling bodies to doctors, one of Fairfax's descendants decided to move all of the bodies to Spring Grove Cemetery, which is where this is now. So they already had a whole story for me when I went there. It's kind of bizarre,
Interesting
but
grounds there. And the canon is interesting too, because there's something about canon we're not being told either.
right. They're everywhere at every VFW around here.
It,
Yeah, I can't help but think something with concrete in them. They kind of look like concrete mixers, but
not sure what they were used for,
maybe
but
they were sound weapons, you know?
well, the giveaway are the ones with the really teeny tiny bores or whatever they're called,
Yeah.
like maybe an inch or two.
What type of damage are gonna
It's like
right.
you
When
see a
they
little
showed
teeny
that
tiny ball in a brick wall.
none of it adds up. Um
And then there's the stories about them. They used to be in front of school buildings. I'm thinking the one in Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth High School had one, and you know, all kinds of stories go along with those things too.
This talks, so yeah, so I live in Montville Township. This talks about how, I'm not sure what this is, a petrifying spring, but this is from, I think, 1830 something, talking about the geography of Montville and how evidence of Indians was all over, including a mound in northeast Montville, which is where I live, that was 10 feet high. I'm not sure what it means by petrifying spring, though. Yeah, so the first road to touch the township was built by General Smith, which is who is him. And it says it was built for the military. A road, a Smith Road was built for the military.
Where are you in relationship to where the Great Black Swamp was located?
The Black River runs into, that's what is the separation of the Continental Divide, basically. So the Black River is the first river to go to the Ohio River, and the Black Swamp is, I'm pretty sure, south of Toledo and south of, so I'm probably a couple hours. It takes me 2 hours to get to Toledo, to Northwest Ohio.
So there's a whole swath of Ohio from that shore of Lake Erie around Toledo into Indiana that was swampland. The stories that go along with that are pretty interesting too,
Really?
because of course everything was built after they drained the swamp, not before. All the railroad lines and all this stuff built afterward, but it's
No way.
looking
Yeah.
at maps and everything, it was already there. But that's kind of close to that area that was swampland
I live
territory.
very close to so many water things too. Like Tinker's Creek is a big tributary that has a lot of these hidden earthworks are along Tinker's Creek. I like to go there and just to check them out. But yeah, I don't have to go far at all for any of this stuff. There's 10 parks in Medina that are within 10 minutes that I can go to that all have stuff I could write about and think about for days. There's a lot of frisbee golf courses around here, a lot of real golf courses. I started noticing apartment complexes and townhomes are all, it's almost like they're built like longhouses, and there's earthworks and barrows right along with them. So
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the frisbee golf courses. Check those out because I found ancient stuff around that. Will Rogers Park in downtown Oklahoma City is an ancient site, and you can find the sewer lines running through there, and there's a frisbee golf course on top of that. And there's ancient
Medina,
stonework that has, archways, and they're picnic shelters now, but they're
right?
clearly older buildings. Red sandstone blocks of stone everywhere. There's so much in what you're talking about. When I was waking up to all of this in Oklahoma City, the apartments where I was living, they were smaller than the megaliths that you typically find, but they were still old stones that weren't new. Let me put it that way. Where they were cut and shaped, and maybe an edge out of it where it would fit into somewhere else.
Exactly.
And this apartment complex was right next to, let's say, like a little industrial park area, and there was a hospital near there, but clear earthworks right next to the place where I lived.
Yeah.
That as I was waking up to this, I started noticing, because I worked at the hospital at the time, and I was walking back
Oh,
and forth
really?
across all this stuff and starting to look around at the smooth shapes and everything else. And not only Oklahoma City, but all of Oklahoma is like that.
Well, I'm sure. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, is it just Ohio, or like it's just these certain places?
They really are everywhere. We have to have a perceptual shift in order to be able to see it.
In order to understand how they benefited us, I'm still having a hard time figuring out what mounds and earthworks.
I think they were part of the grid system, but they were also connected to the heavens. I think a lot of them were mirrors
Oh,
of
yes,
stars
okay.
and constellations. And I found a lot of things just by following ley lines. There's a lot of examples. So like the Serpent Mound in Ohio is a big one. It's got solstice alignments. It's got lunar alignments. It's got every kind of alignment you can think of in that shape, and other
Right.
things. I mean, that's a huge important site, but there's other earthwork sites like the Newark earthworks in Ohio
Yeah,
that have the same kind of solar and lunar alignments. The Fudge site in Indiana, northwest of the Dayton area, going on up
okay.
towards the Indiana Dunes and Gary and on across Lake Michigan into Wisconsin when I was tracking that alignment. So they're called Indian mound sites, and the story that goes along with them all the time is they were built one basketful of dirt at a time by Indians in loincloths. That's the story.
Right.
But they're perfectly aligned with
And
something
perfectly
going on in the
flat and
heavens.
perfectly rounded. And also, it goes back to what we were saying. They're shaped in order in a matching pattern of the like solfeggio sequence or whatever. They're almost sound imprints made out of earth that connect to that are mirrors of astrological.
I mean, these guys knew what they were doing, and it wasn't happening randomly, and it was worldwide. They knew where they were, they knew what they were doing. It all connected. Carl Monk's book, The Code, and you can also find video presentations on YouTube if you type in Carl Monk, The Code, where he shows that these places, these sacred places, are the latitude and longitude are encoded not only in the dimensions of the architecture itself, like how many stories or shape or whatever, it's cross-referencing other locations on the earth. So like Stonehenge and Newark or
Really,
other places, it's like they matched in some
right?
way, shape, or form.
Like
And
you were
so
talking about, like a nerve or like a central nervous system, kind of like if one thing happens in one part, it's going to affect down the line.
likely they knew all of that stuff because it wasn't integrated. energy generating system. It was all connected somehow. And they have building technologies and other technologies that we can't even imagine because they're lost, advanced technologies. No question about who we are, where we came from, how all of these wonderful things were built. They knew all of that stuff, and they weren't trying to figure out how these giant megalithic stone blocks were lifted by
Right.
pulleys and slaves or whatever, or trying to move these stone blocks with trucks, and it's just not happening. How'd they do it? Well, they knew exactly how they did it. We just don't know how
Hmm.
they did it. We weren't,
Yes.
they weren't trying to figure out all the stuff that we're struggling with.
It's like everything that's been put before us is literally just meant to take away that power. Distraction, work. I think you talked with Chad about the collective memory of the trees getting cut down and how that's so sad. If you watch Avatar, when they cut down the tree, it can make you cry. And that's like it feels like something old in you.
And we also talked about the idea that they're still there and that
Yeah,
things can be restored, and don't rule it out. Don't rule out
right.
the trees, and don't rule out us. I mean, we did it before. We can get back there. We've just been kept in this deliberately manipulated state. So our energy can be harvested, and so they've hidden it by distractions, and we have to go to work to earn money, to pay
Or
taxes, and to buy the things that we need, and all that money's going somewhere so we can live and have a decent life, we think.
but when you get down to it, what you're not doing anything.
It's like, we knew why we were here, and that there's a bigger spiritual reason for us to be here, which is reconnecting with our higher selves and each
Yes.
other as a collective. That we're all
Right.
the same being having a unique experience,
A
but
shared dream.
that's been removed from us. And another thing you were talking about with the sound is the ancients could move these giant stones with sound. They knew how to do that. And early on, when I started doing the research that I've been doing here for about 6 years extensively, was learning about, I'm just going to call him an explorer of some kind, was in Tibet witnessing monks move giant stones with sound. That was one of the technologies that we don't have anymore.
And the monks, I mean, I feel like they know a lot of this stuff. Like when you listen to music and you get the chills, that's like a very powerful state to be in energetically. And it was talking about how monks have been able to generate that electricity in themselves without hearing anything. And it allows them to project their mind to different planets, even, and different galaxies. And it's wild.
So the ancient yogic practices in primarily in Eastern traditions, but it was in the West too. Again, it's not what it's come down to. It's as,
Right. That's how they've separated everything, is making everything black and white
but
with
for
rays.
those that chose a monastic lifestyle, they were learning how to access their superpowers. So they could levitate, and they could heat themselves up
Yes.
by certain practices. They could run really fast by certain practices. They could learn to bilocate and be at two places at the same time. They could fly. They could do all of these things. And in the West, you have monks and nuns, and we learn about it in, for example, the Christian tradition, but that was based on something earlier. And you find all over the Channel Islands off the coast of France, you find these monks and this hermetic traditions. And it's been Christianized, but it's not
Yeah.
too far to believe that they were actually doing the same thing that the Eastern monks were, or nuns, or whatever male female practices there were. And then we have a TV show in the 60s called The Flying Nun. Is that somebody's fantasy, or is this disclosure that we actually have that ability under the right circumstances? I'm not saying everybody knows how to do that, but there were certain people that chose spiritual practice over
Right.
everything else. And I know in Tibet, before the communists came in, the whole community would support these people. And probably even now. I mean,
Right,
they would, if they wanted to become a yogi, you want to be a yogi when you grow up, they would provide food. In,
right,
it wasn't the most glamorous lifestyle. I mean, maybe they lived in a cave, or maybe they lived in a little
right.
room, but they were learning how
But the cave,
to,
though.
they were learning how to escape the bonds of physical world and reconnect. It,
Yes.
it wasn't self-punishment.
Oh, that's what I feel called to be doing. And that's crazy. I used to feed the monks in Akron when I lived in Akron. Um, my girlfriend at the time was from Laos, and there's a Buddhist temple there that we would go to, and you give them sticky rice and you give them all types of gifts. Everyone loved the monks. There was like a whole. I don't see that anywhere in Christianity. The amount of people becoming priests and pastors.
Yeah, it was a whole lifestyle, and the original civilization was built around supporting the people that chose to do that. And
Right.
and
Instead of
that's
instead of calling them crazy, which they do now.
yeah, and that's not the version of humanity that the controllers want. And so these people have been genocided and persecuted and had bombs dropped on them, and
Oh yeah.
you name it. And
Do you think that's part of the reason why Laos was such a bombed country during
probably
the
for
Vietnam
that
War?
reason, and also because it was probably a power place as well.
What's
Vietnam
that?
too. I mean, Vietnam is the same way. I mean, that's why, they went in there, was to destroy this civilization and the people.
Right.
And, I think that's the
It. I
history of
feel like
modern
Angkor
warfare.
Wat. I feel like Angkor Wat is the only remnant of what was there. And it's so amazing. The Plain of Jars.
Exactly. The Plain of Jars is Laos is the most bombed country in history per capita. And we weren't even at war there,
Right.
supposedly. It spilled over from Vietnam,
Right.
and they just bombed the heck out of that place.
Akron
Um,
has a huge Lao population. I know a lot of Lao people, and I love them. I love their food, everything. But they're all refugees. They all came here from like their families. Imagine that collective memory.
And I think that's actually a template that the controllers have been using. So, whatever wiped out this original civilization, they just bring in more people, that don't have any connection or past with an area. We think they were orphans, young people.
Wow. So that's what happened here.
They were brought in, and, the conditioning started. Dime Westerns came in about the end of the Civil War, and they were early Westerns geared to young
Do you think the
people.
Civil War happened?
Not the way we're told. I think something happened, but it's not what we were told. It was part of the reset, whatever they
Do you
were
think that
doing.
was, yeah, like a destruction tour of everything?
All the above. And probably the same for the Revolutionary War, all of them. And then, they build up what we know of as America. Our tax dollars and money and blood and sweat and tears goes to destroying these other places. Sadly, what's been going on, and now what we're experiencing is, oh no, our use is done. Turn the guns on them
Right.
now. And Western civilization as a whole, which had a higher standard of living than other countries, third world countries. And now they're trying to turn the West into third world countries
Right.
and bring in all of these people with no past, or, and all these other things that, if you get past the idea that it's freedom for all, an invasion, which it is an invasion to displace the law-abiding citizens of the countries that they're coming into. It's part of that same plan. It's a repeat. It's the same playbook. They've
Wow.
used it effectively in the past. But big difference, we've got the internet, people are waking up,
Right.
and that's why this whole
That's why they
issue,
can't get away with it this time.
yeah, it's why this whole issue is relevant today. What happened to this
I
original
know.
civilization is just as relevant now as it was when it happened, because they're doing the same thing. They're doing the
Right.
same thing. And, they're using race and religion the same way they did before. Only I think before it was just like the day the earth stood still disaster that happened, either
Yeah.
all at once or in waves, and wiped that civilization out. They repopulated, created their new world, and now they're using the same playbook to try to wipe us out, essentially.
It's yeah, it's getting wow. If I could get a time machine to anywhere, the 1800s, I think. I mean, that's what's directly
That's when this was going on. That's when the reset was directly happening. What did they do? How what was life like for regular people? And I've been researching things for a while now, and it wasn't pretty with the insane asylums and the orphans and
yeah,
all the things that were going on with the charitable organizations. They were pumping out alcohol, beer, and distilled spirits. That was like one of the first things they set up. So they were
yeah.
getting the population drunk, and then they were putting them in insane asylums. There were all these kids. The elites were like, what are we going to do with all these humans? And, shipping them on trains to an uncertain future with strangers. I think child trafficking started with the orphan trains and whatever else they
Which
were doing.
is the most potent form of energy manipulation, right? Traumatizing children. It's like,
And the same thing's
what?
happening today.
Yeah,
That's where it started. So these are not I don't believe the beings behind this are human. I think they've messed up a lot of people, you
yeah.
know.
I mean, that's what I was gonna say is how narcissistic abuse comes into this, and how personally you can fight it by beating that battle in your life. That's what I've been dealing with, the amount of damage that can do to somebody is crazy.
And just the abuse and gaslighting in general that
Yes.
we go through every day with the media and the lies that are still happening. Again, more people are starting to see through that and
Yeah.
not accepting it.
Coming to a head, it feel like,
But that's what's going on. We're lied to regularly by people that we trust in our government, in our schools, on the news regularly. And so that's why people doing their own research and starting their own YouTube channels or whatever else are so important. And we're doing it in different areas. So, I got the area that I'm personally looking at the most, which is the grid system and the original civilization and what happened to it. You've got other people that are looking at more current events and what's
yeah,
happening here. I know about the darker stuff, but I don't like to focus on it. Other people do that. And, it's like more and more people are not drinking the Kool-Aid anymore and saying, wait a minute. And there's still so many people that are asleep to it, but the damage has gone deep, with the mind control and the brainwashing and all of that. So, it's people wake up when they're ready. And that's why I don't really talk about this with people that don't know about it unless I know they know about it, because it's just too big of a
yeah.
change. And it
It's too much
doesn't
of
it
a
does not
risk.
help.
It's too big of a risk personally, to have these conversations with people. It can make them.
Yep.
It can. Yeah, you don't want to trigger.
Yep. People really have to be ready for it. And then, the information is out there. There's a smorgasbord of people that are doing research. I think we're finding a lot of the same things. We don't all have the same perspective of what actually went on here and what this world really is, but everybody that's doing the research is contributing to collective awareness and asking the questions that need to be asked. And I
Yeah,
don't see it stopping. And with your great example of the mound in your backyard, you don't have to go far to find this. It's literally everywhere. You just have to see it differently. A lot of stuff coming out. A
unnecessary
lot of
stuff
people
and
being exposed.
realizing we don't have to go through this.
We don't. I mean, they've only gotten away with it because they've tricked us.
Yeah,
But they haven't told us about anything else. And no, we don't. Not only that, they can't do it.
yeah.
They can't do it without our consent. They can't do it anymore if they don't have our consent. And so that's why it's important to do what we
Stand your
can
ground.
as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Wow.
Some things to think about.
Yes.
Appreciate the work that you're doing, Colin, and your insights. And it's exciting. Once you find this, it's like an adventure every time you leave the house.
Real. I know. I mean, the amount of times people, I feel like Indiana Jones, like, but yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way, really.
But you
So,
found some of the things that I found early on, like among other things, like the natural gas pipes on earthworks and all that stuff. It's like check that off the list. When I was living in Oklahoma, it's like
right,
that's a megalithic wall that's on top of.
right. Gas stations. They're all nestled into, yeah, it's amazing. I
Ta
want to really come up with like a checklist to, that you can download. People can be like, just to identify these things around them that to help them.
Tank farms is another one.
What's that? Oh,
Tank farms.
I was gonna bring up around me. There's all of these farms and barns that are built on top of mounds. Like, to find it.
I'll pull up a picture of it, but I was tracking an alignment between Ames, Iowa and Des Moines, Iowa, and the alignment went right through barn doors on somebody's property.
Really? Oh wow. Okay, so and this is right down the road from this is on State Route 94, and about a half a mile down is a place called Paleo Crossing, where they found evidence of 11,000-year-old advanced peoples, and it's a place just like this, a farm. You can't even go there, but
It looks mud flooded on that side too.
that's what I'm saying. Did they build the thing like
That's what they want us to believe.
right?
We
I,
see it as normal, but bottom line is why would you build?
right.
What are we looking at? Why would you build with all of these,
That's like split level homes. Even they're
dunes?
they're built into mounds. Split level homes were so popular back in Martin's Ferry,
Yep.
and I'm realizing it's just because they were built into mounds.
Same
Like,
thing where I grew up. I grew up next to a golf course in Rockville, Maryland, and there are earthworks all over the place.
uh,
We were on the flattest lot on Lindley Terrace, and it had a boomerang shape to it. And we're flat, and then it curves, 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 flattens out here next to a golf course. The walk to the high school that I went to, we had, earthworks on
yeah,
either side on the path to school.
exactly.
And this is not isolated. I think that's what we're trying to say is not just one place.
It's everywhere. Every single place I've been, and yeah, it's exciting though.
I agree. I enjoy exploring and researching everyday things that people do. I don't go to the movies. I occasionally go out to eat as something to
I'm
do, but
having a harder time every day doing normal things, I feel like, and I feel like the only place I'm really 100% welcome is nature. So that's why I spend so much time in parks and going outside, and it's
and you go there and you find all this other stuff.
I know, and I don't want to do any of the other stuff. Like I don't want to do anything that all these nothing appeals to me that they're offering me to do. So,
Yep.
I'm happy doing this.
So I'll end it kind of along the same lines of when I was looking for something to do at Thanksgiving last year. There wasn't a whole lot in Prescott with community activities, but there was Thanksgiving with the lemurs at the zoo. If I wasn't awake, that might be interesting, but nah, no
No,
lemurs.
a zoo. What the?
I'll skip. Thanks. I'll spend
Oh,
Thanksgiving at home by myself with my cat.
right. That's all I got is my cat. Tony's somewhere around here. But Thanksgiving at the zoo is very
With the
paradoxical.
lemurs.
The
So
zoo in Cleveland is amazing. Like the what it's built out of it. They build what these zoos, I think, in
that's
incredible old structures.
zoos too.
They have tunnels going through, it's like the most obvious. It almost looks like a movie set, so they have to put a zoo there. Like, uh,
I haven't been there, but I've looked at online pictures of the Baltimore Zoo and the New Orleans Zoo, and yeah,
mm,
old stuff. Well, we'll have to do this again sometime. Let me
yeah.
know when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
No, you're welcome, and thank you. Enjoy our talks and look forward to more.
Yeah, me too. And I hope to talk to more people in the community too. I feel like talking is a easier way to get further in this stuff than by yourself.
Yeah,
So,
it is. I know it sparked a lot of really good discussion between us, and kind of like we were talking about creativity and what gives us new ideas and other ways of just getting the mind thinking in different ways, which helps shift perception
yes.
and going in a direction you may not have gone otherwise. There's a lot of ways to this, but each person's going to be bringing in their unique perspectives and findings, and that's really what we need. More of the same isn't going to get us out of this. Thanks again. We'll talk again soon.
All right. I appreciate you,
Okay.
Michelle.
Appreciate you too. We'll talk again soon. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.